Verse 8. Vayomer Yehuda leonan bo el eshet achicha veyabem otah v'hakem zera leachicha. Okay, so then Yehuda went to Onan. Pardon me. He said to Onan, "Bo, come el eshet achicha, to the wife of your brother. Veyabem." This is kind of a weird word. It means like take her also as a wife, right? Like take her as another wife, right? And levirate marriage, do a levirate marriage. It's kind of wordy in English, but that's what it means. We have the one word. We even have there's a whole tractate in the Talmud about this called Tractate Yabama. So it's about doing the levirate marriage, right? If the husband dies and there's no children, specifically no male heirs to carry out his name, then the Torah instructs to take the wife as your own, that a brother should, right? And then give sons, and the first son that's given from this will not inherit from the other brother. It will be in the old brother's name. And this was a way to protect the widow from going penniless, right? Since she couldn't inherit the land that her husband owned and that sort of stuff. So she would have to starve or become a prostitute or something like that. Ota. The hakim, this is Hefil from Kum, to arise and raise up zera, seed or offspring, le'achicha, to your brother. Vayedaha Onan ki lo yike hazara v'hayaha imbael eshet achicha v'shichet atzaha levilti natan zera leachiv. All right. So verse 9. But Yeda Onan knew. Ki lo, that not to him Yike would be Hazara, the offspring. V'haya, and so it would be Imba el Eshet. Okay, I'm sorry. So it came to pass that he came unto the wife of Achiv, his brother, the Shichet, and he spoiled Artsa to the ground. Okay, this means he dripped his seed. He didn't allow it to go inside of her. So he had fun with her. He had fun with his brother's widow. Right? He had sexual gratification, but the purpose of the Yabama marriage, the Levirate marriage, was not fun. The purpose was so the brother's name would not be wiped out, and so the widow would have something, right? And so the children would have something that is. So he's not loving his brother, right? He's definitely not being his brother's keeper. This harkens back to the sin of Cain. The vilti natan zera, but instead the seed would be given le'achiv, to his brother, right? So in those days, in agricultural days, people wanted the workers for themselves, right? They wanted all those kids. Sons are workers. They're going to work the farm. That's how it was seen. Very practical. Today, people think, oh, it's about romance, right? And all this stuff. And okay, sure, it's a luxury that we have today. This was not a luxury that most of our ancestors had in those days. Verse 10. Vayera ve'enei Adonai asher asa Vayamat gamoto, but it was evil. Be'eni Adonai, in Adonai's sight. Asher asa, that which he did, meaning Onan did. Vayamet gam oto, and he killed also him, or rather, and he also died. Hold on. Okay, just for a second, my solar is beeping. I'm surprised the battery failed so quick today. I think we had a cloudy day. I need to ask for someone upstairs to plug in Meralco, please. Yeah. Hopefully that happens. If not, you'll see my lights go off. All right. So Yabim, this is to take a deceased brother's wife. There's a definition. Okay. Kinsman's redeemer is how you'll often hear this translated into English, the one who does this thing. And then the Shichet Artsa, literally to ruin the earth, meaning he spilled his semen on the ground. Okay. There's also a Midrash that teaches that new demons are formed when one intentionally spills semen on the earth. So that's kind of, it's called the semen demon by people that poke fun. The liberal Jews, they poke fun at it, calling it the semen demon. But this is in actually in Talmud Tractate Berachot. It talks about this concept that this happens. Well, you don't know if it's true or not, right? This is This is one of our legends. We know that the demons, most of the creatures that we call demons, if not all, they are the descendants of the Nephilim, right? So the Nephilim, they took daughters of men, we're told in Genesis 6, I think 4, and and they intermarried with them, and their offspring were the Nephilim, the giants. That means from Aramaic Nephila, right? And so the giants were the men of great renown, we're told, of great fame, right? It's interesting because this gets corrupted in Greek mythology. You get like Hercules, and so it's kind of based on the same truth. There's the top god, one of the divine beings, intermarries with humans or has children with humans, and they form these like demigods. We're not saying that polytheism is correct, but it's interesting how the enemy perverts the truth, right? There's an essential truth in the Bible, or the Babylonians, they say, yeah, it's true. Their chief god Marduk was mad at the lower gods because they intermarried with humans, right? In the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, it talks about this, and so they also have their own traditions. They say this is why Babylon's so great, because these descendants, they taught us magic, and that's why we conquered everybody. They taught us how to fight, right? So basically, the Bible just corrects the record. It says, well, actually, those weren't the good guys. and neither are you, Babylon. Right? So you get these essential truths in the Bible that get perverted when they go out into the Gentile world. It still happens today with misunderstandings of the apostolic writings in the New Testament, because most of the Goyish denominations, the Gentile denominations in Christianity, they have divorced themselves from their Jewish roots. They're supposed to be grafted into us, right? We're told in Romans that that we are the cultivated olive tree, and the Gentiles are a wild olive tree that's supposed to be grafted in. And the process of grafting in that the Apostle Paul uses, this is conversion language. It means converting to the proper form of Judaism, which is Messianic Judaism, which is coming to the one true root, which is having, as the book of Revelation says, the enemies of the beast will not be the Christians, most of the Christians. The enemies of the beast will be those, the beast will make war with those who have in the Greek, the entolon, terotesen entolon ten theo, tu theo. They keep the laws of God, one, and also have the martyria tu Iesu, the testimony of Yeshua. Those two things are the enemies of God. Keeping the laws of God and the testimony of the Messiah, right? So most of the Gentiles, they don't keep the laws of God, so they'll be safe when the mark of the beast is here and the beast is running around making war with people. They're going to make war against them because they're harmless. They're harmless. The harmful ones are the ones who keep the law of God, the obedient ones, those who are not lawless, right? So Yeshua, when he says on that day, many will come to me in that day and say, I cast out demons and I healed the sick in your name, and all this stuff we did, all these works we did in your name. What will Yeshua say? Depart from me. I never knew you. You workers of the Greek word anomia, which means lawlessness, or literally not Torah keeping. Not Torah keeping. So it's a very scary verse for those of you who really study the Bible. And I'm not saying that everybody who doesn't keep the law will not go to heaven, right? God delights in mercy, right? He delights in mercy. But it's clearly a mistake. Let me see if there's any comments. Yeah, someone says froze. Sorry, I'm doing an experiment where my camera is embedded in the slides as I teach, right? And I noticed that when I pull up your chat comments, the screen freezes. So sorry about that. Ted says that, but the method is being taught in birth control. Okay, so this is an interesting question. By an agency here in population control. Okay, so what Ted is talking about is the Roman Catholic denomination, the Roman Catholic sect, does not believe that use of birth control is permitted, right? So, of course, we're against abortion, anything that kills a human, even a conceptus, right when the baby's conceived. The enemy tries to lie and call some of these drugs that the woman can take birth control drugs, when really they're killing a baby, is what's happening. Even the term abortion, it's a stupid term. Why do we call it abortion? Abortion was invented by the pro-abortionists because it's softer, right? It's murdering is what it is. We should call it murdering a baby, right? I'm pro-murdering a baby. How would that sound instead of I'm pro-abortion, right? Or pro-choice, even a further misnomer we have in America. I'm pro-choice. You should have a choice. Okay, so tell that to the criminal with a gun who comes in your house. Hey, you know what? Kill us. We're pro-choice. It's your choice. You want to kill a person? Go ahead, right? My friend who lives in Korea told me also they have the devil does the same thing there, right? Even though it's technically illegal to get an abortion in Korea, there are places that do it, and it doesn't get prosecuted usually. And they call it deletion in their language. deleting. Did you delete the baby? All these euphemisms to make us not see how wicked the act is. So, birth control, I do not see birth control from the Torah. I don't see anything in the Torah that says that you can have birth control. I mean, if we're being strictly orthodox about it, with orthodox halakha, if you have one boy and one girl already, then you're allowed to have birth control. Okay? I'm not saying that's our messianic perspective. That's the orthodox, the extreme position, okay? Is if you already have at least one boy and one girl, you're allowed to have birth control, okay? Because you fulfilled the mitzvah, piru, be fruitful and multiply, right? With at least one boy and one girl. If you have 10 boys and no girls, no birth control allowed. 10 girls and no boys, no birth control allowed. You gotta have at least one and one of each sex. So, sister, birth control is not a sin. At least, I've never heard a messianic rabbi proclaiming a sin. So I think this is pretty true across the various shapes of messianic Judaism, right? That birth control is not a sin, especially if you already have children, right? Now, that being said, and also, so if the method is to pull out, the sin was not that Onan dripped his seed on the ground, okay? The sin was his intent. Intent. You ever heard the saying, intent is half of the law, right? So, because he intended to violate his brother's wife, he intended to enjoy her, right? And think she probably still misses her husband, right? It's probably horrible for her to go through this, having another man now, but what, she's going to have her children starve, right? And so she was forced into this position. She didn't have to. The Talmud explains that she did not have to. It's her choice, right? So this is not like, an Islamic Quran sort of thing where, the lady gets no choice, and if she gets married when she's 6 to the Prophet Muhammad or something, right? There's no choice, right? This is not like that, right? Like poor Aisha, when the pedophile prophet preyed on her and touched her from age 6 and then slept with her at age 9, right? Until he died when she's 17, right? So it's nothing like that. The woman had a choice, right? And the man actually had a choice too. When the laws, we're told more about this in Deuteronomy, it's elaborated some more, that the man could refuse to redeem her, right? But then he has to go through this whole procedure, right? She takes off her sandal, hits him in the face with the sandal, or some say throw it on the ground. It looks like she spits on his face. And then the elders say, this is what happens to the one who refuses to redeem his brother, right? So it's a real refusal. But if you really didn't want to, right, there's a way out for both of them, right? But it was seen as at least a tool to protect her family from devastation and ruin, financial ruin. So the sin here, some of you, this is a touchy subject, but about a month ago, one of you asked about masturbation, right? I don't like talking about these sorts of things. Who does, right? It's uncomfortable. But we care about serving God, and we care about what's sin and what's not sin, right? And so one of the brothers asked me, is masturbation a sin, right? And that's a tough one because it can be, right? It depends. Are you looking at something, right? Are you, what's your mind doing? You imagine some guy's wife, or some famous movie star who's married, or to the men. I'm thinking of the men. Women, don't judge the guys too harshly. So to the men, you have to be. It's a sticky question. It's a difficult question because it depends. It really depends what's happening, right? Is the purpose to avoid actual sexual sin, right? Is the purpose just so that teenage boys? My goodness, 17-year-olds, they'll be sitting in math class and they can't think about anything else, right? So is it going to allow you to have a better thought life, right? In those cases, yeah, I would say there are some slim cases where it's permitted, right? Now, the sin that happened here was not that he used her for masturbation or something. The sin is that he refused to redeem his brother, right? He enjoyed himself, and that's it. So it was a very wicked act. It's almost up there with rape, what he did, right? Because there's a contract between the two of them. The reason she's allowing him to touch her is so that her children will have some kind of inheritance, right? And that she will have some inheritance to live on, that they won't have to starve or defile themselves somehow just to make a living. There weren't options like today. A woman couldn't just be a secretary or something, right? Or a scientist or whatever, They didn't have there weren't these economic possibilities for women. It was an agrarian society only. Okay? So I hope that answers that question. We take the uncomfortable topics here too, yeah? By the way, better to ask the tough questions, guys, than to not know and to end up sinning. Verse 11. Actually, I'm an hour in, so I think I'm just going to read these from out, so it's faster. Vayomo Yehuda. Then Yehuda said, "The Tamar to Tamar, Kalato, his daughter-in-law, Shivi almana, remain as a widow, veit avicha. And then Ibn Ezra comments that you don't always have to say in when it's with the word beit. For some reason, they don't always like to double the ba bite. So it literally says house of your father, but we can say in the house of your father. Al yid ad, until yidgal shela, until Shela grows up. Vini, my son, grows up. Ki amar pen, because he said this means to himself. Pen yamut gamhu, lest he also die. Ke achayiv, like his brothers. Vatelech Tamar, so Tamar went, Vateshiv, and she dwelled Beit Aviha, at her father's house. Now, this is why this was bad. The Rashbam comments, he's telling her not to merely to stay there, but to stay a widow. Stay a widow, right? Very difficult. And Chizquni says, the whole statement, until my son grows up, quote, and marries another woman and has sons by her. Once he has sons of his own, then, and can be sure he will not die childless, he will do a brother-in-law's duty to you. So what Yehuda is not actually trying to absolutely break the law here, right? But he's trying to sidestep it. He's trying to kind of sidestep the spirit of the law or the letter of the law, or whatever you want to call it, right? What he's doing is he's saying, okay, look, I know I'm supposed to give him to you now, but I'm not going to give him to you now. I will eventually give him to you after he has children, after he has other children. When he has children already, and I have grandchildren from him, then you can have him, right? That's what he's saying. And this is still a violation. He's supposed to give him to her right away. What, she suffers now? She's a burden on her father now? You're not supposed to go back to your father's house. This isn't supposed to have to happen. This is not, the way that things should be. Sorry, I've got a little bit of trouble with my studio here. Okay, let's see if there's any comments. Okay. All right. Next we have verse 12, and it says, Vayirbu hayamim, and the days were great, meaning a lot of time went by. Vatamat Batshua, and Batshua died. Okay, so this is Yehuda's wife, Eshet Yehuda, the wife of Yehuda. Vayinachayim Yehuda, and Judah wanted to comfort himself. Vayal al Gozazi Tzono, when he went up to shear his sheep. Hu vechira, he and Chira his buddy, the Adulamite. Timnatha, they went up to this place called Timnath. Vayugad leTamar, and it was told to Tamar, Lemor saying, Hine, Chamecha, look, Chamech, pardon me, look out, your father-in-law, Ole, is going up Timnatha, to Timnath. Lagos Sono, to shear his sheep. Verse 14. But Tasar bigdei almanuhtah. So she got rid of her widow's clothing, me'aleha, from upon her, but tachas, and she covered herself, but saif, with like a headdress, like a scarf. But titalaf, and she covered all over, vateshif, the fetach, and she sat down at the opening of Einayim. There's a place, Petach Einayim. Literally means the opening of the eyes, but it's a place. I love the name of the places in the Bible. Asher al derech Timnatha, which is along the path, the way to Timnath. So he's going to have to pass by her. Kiga'ata, because she saw or she noticed, or remember we mentioned this verb can mean knew. Ki gadal Shela, that Shela was already grown up. Vehu lo nitana lo, and he was not given to her. Lo leisha. She was not given to him, pardon me, to be a wife, as a wife, okay? So she's no fool. Okay? By the way, this Einayim, it could mean, that's right, 2 eyes or 2 water springs. Or maybe there were 2 springs there. It's funny to me. So she's dressing up as a prostitute, right? And it's so funny. In Islam, the pious woman has to cover herself, right? Completely, right? In biblical times, that was a hooker who did that, right? So covering her face and everything, that was for a prostitute. So it's kind of funny that, to me, that this became like the mark of a modest woman. They had to cover themselves. Not for the women. I'm not laughing at their abuse. It's just so ridiculous how twisted, Isaiah warns us, woe to those who call what is good evil and what is evil good, who make what is sweet bitter and what is bitter sweet. That's for sure about the false prophet. verse 15. Let's see if we have any questions first. Someone wrote me a funny thing in private. All right. Oy. All right, maybe for the interest of time, maybe we'll just go through the English because I'm a little worried. We're at an hour, 10 minutes, and I'm really trying hard to get these teachings down for you guys. I like to go through all the Hebrew so you can kind of get that in your passive memory, and it'll help you with your Hebrew learning. But I also don't want to. I don't want to I don't want to exasperate you. Okay. All right. So it says, and Yehuda saw her, and he reckoned her for a prostitute because her face was covered. Right? So he turned to her on the road and he said, "Come now, let me come to you." For he didn't know that it was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me if you come to me?" He said, "I myself will send over a goat kid from the flock." She said, "If you give collateral for when you send payment." So you see payments in italices. So this is my translation. This is my book here. Whenever I put a word there that's not actually in the Hebrew text, I put it in italices. So you can know that that's not there, but it means that, right? We have to infer that. He said, "What shall be the collateral that I give you?" She said, "Your signet ring and your sealing string and your staff which is in your hand." So he gave them to her, and he came to her, and he impregnated her. Yikes. So here's my little comment. Oh yeah, the stuff from Isaiah. Okay, good. Okay, verse 19. Then she got up and went and removed her wrap from upon her and dressed in her widow's clothes. Later, Yehuda sent the kid by hand of his shepherd, the Adulami, right, the Adulamite guy, to retrieve his pledge from the woman's hand. But he could not find her. So he inquired of the men of her place, saying, "Where's the prostitute? Where's the hooker who was at Anayan by the road?" But they said, "There wasn't any prostitute like this." Okay, so how embarrassing that they have to ask for a prostitute, right? So this is really bad that an Israeli would do this, right? That a son of Israel, it's like that's our reputation. We're out there looking for prostitutes, right? So the word for prostitute that's used here, it's even kind of worse, right? The word for a whore is a zona in Hebrew, but that's not the word that's used here. It says kedesha, kedesha. So kedesha is from the word kadosh, meaning sanctified, right? A kedesha was a woman who was sanctified to a religious cult, right? In one of the Canaanite religions, to be a prostitute in their religion, right? So some of these religions, it's like New Age today, right? People just hook up and have sex, and that's it. Goodbye. Thanks for the fun, right? And that's really what a Kadesha was. Sometimes paid, sometimes not paid. Part of the religious process, right? So, yeah, ouch. So she's a Kadesha even, he thought, right? So it's kind of hard to talk Judah out of this, to get him out of the sinful aspect of what's going on here. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't put up my translation for this one. We'll just have to do the Hebrew. Verse 22 and 23. Vayashav el Yehuda, Vayomer, and he returned to Yehuda and he said, "Lo matzatiha, I didn't find her. V'gam anshe hamakom, and also the men of that place, Amru, they said, Lo haita vazeh kadesha, there was not here a kadesha, a cult prostitute." Verse 23. Now, it might just be that the way, it might be that Judah didn't understand all their weird religious twistings, and so they just thought kadesha meant prostitute, right? So it might not be that he really thought she was worshiping other gods and all this weird stuff. Vayomer Yehuda, then Yehuda said, "Tikachla, take her, pen, take it to her, pen nichye lavuz, unless it will happen as scorn, right? It will become scorn, meaning like the whole affair. Hine, behold, shalachti, I've sent hagidi hazeh, this kid, ve'ata, and you lo metzatah, and you haven't found her, right? So what does he mean, like that we're going to be scorned for this? So the Rashbam comments, I'm not going to send this to her again, lest we become a laughing stock, right? Looking for prostitutes. Right? The idea is, oh, that Judah guy, he's always looking for hookers, right? So he's like, We'll look for her one more time, and that's it. If you don't find her, fine. Let her keep my stuff. Verse 24, we're almost finished. Sit tight, guys, with the Torah portion, and then we'll wrap up. And after 3 months, typo in my translation, it was related to Yehuda that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, had slept around. And also she was now pregnant from her shameful acts. So Yehuda said, bring her out and let her burn. Right? So he's judge, jury, and executioner. Without hearing any evidence, he just heard some hearsay, some lashon hara, maybe motzi shamra about her, right? Some evil speech, some gossip. She was brought out. Then she sent to her father-in-law, saying, the man who owns these things made me pregnant. So she said, do you recognize now to whom belongs this signet ring and these sealing strings and this staff? And Yehuda recognized and said, you are more righteous than I. It is because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. Then he did not sleep with her ever again. Right? So he realized he's going to kill this woman. Right? Can you imagine? He's going to execute her in his haste to judgment. Some of you might be thinking about the story of the adulterous woman, right? You know the story, supposedly, in John, where some Pharisees, they brought a woman before Yeshua, and they threw her to her knee, and they said, the law of Moses says we have to execute her, but what do you say? And he writes in the ground for a while, and he says, let those of you without sin cast the first stone, and they start to leave from the oldest ones, then to the younger, till they all were gone. And he said, woman, where are your accusers? And she said, nowhere, my Lord. And he says, neither do I accuse you. Go and sin no more, okay? So you might be thinking that. It's kind of a natural comparison to jump to from here. The only problem is that it didn't happen. That didn't happen. That is not part of the Greek Bible, okay? Not the Greek Bible from antiquity. Okay? This story I've shared before with you guys. I showed you all the sources and everything. If you check out the oldest documents like Textus Vaticanus and Textus Sinaiticus, these are two of our oldest complete manuscripts of the apostolic writings, the New Testament, and many other of the old documents. All of the older ones do not have the story in it. It appears centuries and centuries later. Some places they put it in Luke. And as someone who actually reads the Gospel of John in Greek, I can tell you that before I ever learned this, reading in Greek, it's kind of strange when you get to the story of the adulterous woman, because, well, we have a thing called Johannine, the Johannine literature, right? So these are all the things that John wrote, okay? And he uses Greek a certain way. He has a certain vocabulary, a certain way of talking, right? And that story of the adulterous women, it has so many words that John doesn't use elsewhere. It's very clear the style was somebody else wrote it other than John. And so really what happened, some monk somewhere wanted to put that story in the Bible. It's a nice story. It's a beautiful story. And people who are watching this video might get angry at me. Go ahead, be angry. That's fine. Be angry. And then ask a scholar. Ask a biblical scholar. Anyone, a Christian biblical scholar, Baptist, I dare not say Lutheran, but yeah, that's fine. Lutheran, even those who follow after the wicked Martin Luther and his ilk, any of those guys. Ask any of them. A scholar, not a pastor, a scholar. You ask a biblical scholar, is this part of the Bible? And they will tell you, well, they might not tell you. They might say, I don't want to talk about it. Because scholars don't like to talk about these things because they don't want to get stoned by you. Because people, they have their own kind of, I like the story. Let's keep it there. I like it. I don't care that it was added or that people say it was added. Boy, tell this to someone who's a King James only person and they will crucify you. But if you check any kind of scholarship, it doesn't matter which denomination, they're going to tell you, no. In the NA28, which is the scholarly Greek text that's used by Bible translators in the critical apparatus of the text, it says in German that that none of the earlier sources make mention of this, and this is doubtful, right? And so we have two double brackets that mark it for deletion. But everybody's a coward. The translators are cowards. You get NIV, NASB, any of the modern translations, and what they do is in the English they put the brackets around it. But they don't. But people don't usually go to investigate. What do those brackets mean? What do the brackets mean? It's in my Bible. What do they mean? It means marked for deletion. It means we're too cowardly to take it out because people like this. Because it's our Gentile tradition to have this in the text. Because look, it looks like It looks like Yeshua is against the law of God. Right? Now, what WWJD? What would Jesus do if she's really an adulteress? I believe he would allow the trial to continue. I know it sounds mean, right? But Yeshua was a mean guy. Sometimes he was very mean. He was mean to those who violated God's law. An adulteress, mot yumat, shall indeed be put to death, as well as an adulterer shall indeed be put to death. Right? He made a whip, people. He didn't go and buy a whip. When he enters into the temple, what happens? The Greek says he made a fragalion. Fragalion is, you ever heard of a cat of nine tails? It's a whip with many whips on the end. And on the end of each piece, there's a metallic sharp spike, right? Sometimes glass. So that when you'd whip the person, it would dig into their flesh, and then you pull back and it tears their skin off, okay? The Messiah made that thing himself to make sure it would work well. He made it. All right, because sometimes people are like, oh, why is the God of the Old Testament angry? And the God of the New Testament, he's so sweet. No, same God. It's the same guy, okay? Read Revelation sometimes, will you? If you think Yeshua is just a sweetie, right? Forgiving people for blatantly hating God. And what does it mean to hate God? It means you disobey his commandments intentionally. That demonstrates hatred. What does it mean to love God? Yeshua says to us, we have in the Greek. He says, "En agapes the me, teresontain and tolen mian." If you love me, you keep my commandments. That's expressing love, keeping the commandments. Breaking them, especially big ones, guys, like adultery. Intentionally doing adultery, this is bad news. The death penalty is for the sake, not only for the victim, but also for the adulterers. Better to die now in this world than to face eternal damnation because of that thing. So it would have been an act of cruelty, I believe, for Yeshua to let her go, like the fake story tells us. Okay. It's a Christian Midrash. It's a Gentile Midrash that was elevated to the status of absolute truth and added to the Bible. Okay. All right. Why did he not sleep with her anymore? We're told he never slept with her again. Because such unions are not allowed in the Torah. Your son dies, you can't marry his wife. It's not allowed. It's forbidden. It's forbidden. You can't be like the Prophet Muhammad, who liked his son's wife, and he went into her house. We're told in authentic hadith, and he says, "Oh, blessed be Allah who caused my heart to leap for you." Right? Such silliness in that wicked religion. And so the son divorces her, and Muhammad marries her. Not allowed in Judaism. Not allowed. Our God is a just God. Don't ever let anybody tell you that the God of Islam is the same God of the Bible. They are polar opposites. The God of Islam is the God who is about sex. Everything is about sex. That's all it is. Heaven is sex. Earth is sex. All the sex the guy can get. Okay, I forgot to give credit. This is Rabbi Gersonides on this note here. He asks, how could Judah simply announce, bring her out and let her be burned without examining her? Who gave Judah the final say in this case? Even if he really was the chief judge, no one is allowed to judge a case involving his relatives, let alone himself. By the way, I've heard pastors talk about that adulterous woman story. Where was the man? Okay, so if we had a scenario like this, true, the man should die also. But it doesn't mean you can't kill the lady because the man got away. You know, they both deserve death. I mean, if we had serial killers going around murdering people and they were a team, right? Like Bonnie and Clyde. And let's say that we caught Bonnie but not Clyde. So we can't kill Bonnie because we didn't get Clyde. Just people don't think anymore. There's no reasoning. I've heard so many pastors say they didn't bring the man. That's why they couldn't kill him. It's like, no. Everyone dies for their own sins, right? We die for our own sins. The other person who sinned with you, who helped you steal something or whatever, doesn't have to be there getting punished with you. You stole, you get punished for stealing. The person who helped you got away. All right, he didn't really get away. We're almost done with the Torah portion. And it was at that time that she gave birth. There were twins in her womb. And as she birthed, one placed his hand out, and the midwife took and tied a crimson string around his hand. saying, "This one came first." But then he retracted his hand, and suddenly, I don't think that's fair, by the way. I don't think just because he got his hand out, he should come first. I think the one that actually gets born first should be the first, right? By the way, they're not telling us that God approved this, at the time because the hand stuck out. This is just what the midwives thought, right? But then he retracted his hand, and suddenly the brother came out. So she said, "How you have burst forth by yourself, bursting." So he called his name Perets, which means bursting, like bursting out. Afterwards, I have a friend in Israel named Perets. Shout out to Perets if you listen to this. Afterwards, his brother, whose hand was marked with the crimson thread, came out, and he called his name Zarach. Zarach means like shining, right? Shining. Maybe, okay, because his hand shone out or something. Okay, so here's the Hebrew. So you can see it's a play on words we lose in English. Ma paratsta alecha pirates. How you burst out upon with you, bursting, right? And so then they call him Perets. So it's partsata parets perets. Okay.